Wife shouted. I don't need you anymore, you never do enough. So I left and stopped covering the rent. The blue light of my laptop screen cast shadows across our apartment at 3 a.m. Again. My eyes burned, but I kept typing. One more line of code, one more bug fix, one more hour of work before I could allow myself to crawl into bed beside Rachel, who had long since fallen asleep. This was my routine, my life for the past 18 months. My name is Daniel Chen, and I was 32 years old when I co-founded Technova with my college roommate Eli. We had a vision, a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their customer relationships. I believed in it with every fiber of my being, so much so that I had poured our savings, my time, and my soul into making it a reality. You coming to bed anytime soon? Rachel had asked earlier that night, standing in the doorway of our spare bedroom that had become my makeshift office. She wore that silk nightgown I had bought her for our 3rd anniversary, back when I still had a stable job at a software company, back when I could afford spontaneous gifts without checking our account balance first. Just one more hour, I promised, not looking up from my screen. We're fixing a critical issue in the database architecture. Rachel sighed, the kind of sigh that carried the weight of 100 unspoken arguments. It's always one more hour with you, one more day, one more week before things take off. I finally looked up at her. In the dim light I could see the fatigue in her eyes, not from lack of sleep, but from waiting. Always waiting for the man she married to deliver on promises that seemed increasingly hollow. I know it's been tough, I said, my voice soft, but we're close. LA has meetings lined up with 3 potential investors next week. One of them is Horizon Ventures. They're big players. Rachel crossed her arms. You said the same thing last month about different investors, and the month before that. She was right. We had faced rejection after rejection. But each no just made me work harder, stay up later, push further. Rachel didn't understand that failure was part of the entrepreneurial journey, or maybe she did understand, but had grown tired of being dragged along for the ride. This time is different, I insisted. Our product is more refined, and our pitch deck is solid. LA has a connection at Horizon through his former boss. Rachel uncrossed her arms and let them fall to her sides in defeat. Whatever you say, Daniel, I'm going to bed. As the door closed behind her, I felt a familiar pang of guilt. I hadn't been easy to live with lately. Our apartment, once filled with laughter and spontaneous date nights, had become a silent battleground of unmet expectations. The next morning, I woke up with a crick in my neck from falling asleep at my desk. The smell of coffee lured me to the kitchen where Rachel was already dressed for her job at the marketing firm. She slid a mug across the counter without making eye contact. Thanks, I murmured, taking a sip. Did you sleep okay? Fine, she replied curtly, scrolling through her phone. Then looking up, the rent is due tomorrow. I nodded. I know, I've got it covered. With what? Your startup hasn't made a dime, and you haven't taken a real paycheck in months. I pulled out my personal laptop and logged into our joint account. I did some freelance work for Gary's company last week. It's enough for rent and utilities. Rachel's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained skeptical. And what about next month? And the one after that? Daniel, we can't keep living like this. We won't have to, I promised. Once we secure funding. If she interrupted. If you secure funding. Not when. I closed my laptop with more force than necessary. Why can't you believe in this like I do? Why can't you see what I'm trying to build for us? Because I can't pay bills with potential, she snapped, grabbing her purse. I can't tell the landlord to wait until your big break. I can't. She stopped herself, taking a deep breath. I have to go to work. An actual job that pays actual money. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with my cooling coffee and the weight of her words. That evening, I met Eli at our tiny shared office space in a neglected corner of the city. The rent was cheap, the Wi-Fi spotty, but it was ours. Eli was already there, his enthusiasm a stark contrast to the cloud hanging over me from my morning with Rachel. Danny, check this out, he called as I walked in. I finally cracked the synchronization issue. Our app can now handle offline data much better. I forced a smile, setting down my backpack. That's great, man. Eli's grin faltered. What's wrong? You look like hell. I sank into my chair, rubbing my face. Rachel and I had another argument this morning. About money, about the startup. Eli nodded sympathetically. He'd heard this before. She still doesn't get it, huh? She thinks I'm chasing some pipe dream, I said, staring at my hands. She wants security, stability, things I can't give her right now. But you will, Eli insisted, turning his monitor toward me. Look at these metrics from our beta testers. User satisfaction is through the roof. We're solving a real problem here, Danny. The money will come. I wanted to believe him. No, I needed to believe him. Because the alternative meant I had sacrificed my marriage for nothing. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. I'd work late at the office with Eli, come home to a quiet apartment, and find a note from Rachel on the counter. Dinner in the fridge, or sometimes just went to bed. We were like ships passing in the night, communicating through post-it notes and brief texts. On the rare occasions we were both home and awake, the tension was palpable. Rachel would ask about my day out of politeness, but her eyes would glaze over the moment I mentioned anything technical. I in turn would inquire about her work, but my mind would drift to unresolved coding issues or potential pitch improvements. One Saturday afternoon I was preparing to meet Eli for yet another weekend work session when Rachel appeared in the living room, dressed in a new outfit I hadn't seen before. "Where are you headed?" I asked, surprised to see her ready to go out. We hadn't made plans together in weeks. "Brunch with the girls," she replied, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Amanda got promoted, so we're celebrating." I nodded, trying to ignore the sting. Once upon a time we would have celebrated achievements together. Now we live separate lives under the same roof. "That's nice," I said lamely. "Tell her congratulations from me." Rachel paused, her hand on the doorknob. "You know, Daniel, she's been at that company for less time than you've been working on your startup, but she's already climbed 2 positions." The implication hung in the air between us. Amanda was succeeding while I was stagnating. "Different industries work differently," I said, my voice tight. "Tech startups take time to what? To drain our savings? To take over your life?" Rachel's voice rose slightly. "To come between us?" I closed my eyes, counting to 5 before responding. "I'm building something important, something that could set us up for life if it takes off. If, Rachel threw her hands up. "Meanwhile, I'm the one keeping us afloat. I'm the one with the steady paycheck. I'm the one making sure we don't get evicted while you chase your dreams." Her words cut deep because they contained truth. While I contributed what I could from freelance gigs, her salary covered most of our living expenses these days. Yet I was the one who had insisted on keeping our apartment in this upscale neighborhood when we could have downsized. I wanted Rachel to maintain her lifestyle, even if it meant stretching myself thin. "I know you're carrying more than your share right now," I acknowledged quietly. "And I'm grateful. But this won't be forever." Rachel checked her watch and sighed. "I'm late. We'll talk about this later." But we never did. That night she came home late, tipsy from bottomless mimosas, and fell asleep on the couch. I covered her with a blanket and retreated to my office, where I worked until dawn, fueled by determination and a growing sense of desperation. The following week brought a glimmer of hope. An angel investor expressed interest after seeing our demo. It wasn't Horizon Ventures, but it was something. I came home early that day, bringing takeout from Rachel's favorite Thai place, a peace offering of sorts. She seemed genuinely happy about the news, asking questions about the investor and the next steps. For a brief moment, I felt like we were on the same team again. But the moment shattered when her phone buzzed with a text. "It's Amanda," she said, reading the message. "She just closed a huge account at work. Her commission alone is more than..." She trailed off, but I could fill in the blank, more than what I had contributed to our household in months. "That's great for her," I said, keeping my voice neutral while pushing my pad thai around the container. Rachel set down her phone. "You know, I got offered a promotion last week." I looked up, genuinely surprised. "You did? Why didn't you tell me?" "When would I have told you, Daniel? You're either at the office or locked in your room here. Besides, it would mean longer hours, more responsibility." "You should take it," I encouraged. "You deserve it." Rachel studied me for a long moment. "If I take it, I'd have even less time to..." She gestured vaguely around the apartment. "To what?" I prompted. "To be a wife," she said simply. "To be part of a couple. To maintain this facade that we're still in this together when it feels like you checked out months ago. Her words hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. I'm working this hard for us. Are you? She challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're working this hard for yourself, for your vision, for your ego. Not for us. I stood up, appetite gone. I can't do this right now. I have a call with Eli in 20 minutes to prepare for the investor meeting. Rachel's laugh was hollow. Of course you do. Run back to your startup. It's clearly the only relationship that matters to you anymore. As I shut myself in my office, her words echoed in my head. Was she right? Had I been so focused on building a future that I'd sacrificed our present? The spreadsheet on my screen blurred as I contemplated how we'd reached this point. That night, as I crawled into bed long after midnight, I found Rachel's side empty. A note on her pillow read, "Staying at Jessica's tonight. Need space to think." I stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering how much longer we could go on like this. Something had to give. I just didn't realize yet that it would be me. It was Wednesday when everything finally shattered. I had spent 14 hours in back-to-back meetings with potential investors. My throat was raw from repeating our pitch, my mind numb from answering the same questions about market penetration and revenue projections. But there was a spark of hope. 2 of the 5 meetings had ended with genuine interest, not the polite dismissals we'd grown accustomed to. LA had clapped me on the back as we parted ways outside our office building. "We're getting close, Danny. I can feel it." I nodded, too exhausted to speak, and made my way home through the evening rush hour. The subway was packed, forcing me to stand pressed against strangers for 40 minutes. By the time I climbed the stairs to our 3rd-floor apartment, my legs felt like lead and my head pounded with each step. The lights were on in the living room, and Rachel's voice drifted from the kitchen. She was on the phone, laughing about something. The sound was so unfamiliar in our home that I paused in the hallway, listening to her animated conversation. "I know. That's exactly what I told him," she was saying. "At some point you have to stop chasing fantasies and deal with reality." I stepped into view, setting down my laptop bag. Rachel glanced up, her smile fading slightly. She held up one finger, a silent request for me to wait while she finished her call. "Anyway, I should go." "He just got home," she said, her tone shifting to something more controlled. "Yeah, talk to you tomorrow." She ended the call and set her phone on the counter. "Hey, you're home earlier than usual." 5 investor meetings in one day, I explained, rolling my shoulders to ease the tension. "Any chance there's dinner?" "I'm starving." Rachel's expression hardened. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge. I ate hours ago." I nodded, too tired to register her tone as I moved to the refrigerator. Finding the container, I spooned cold pasta onto a plate and put it in the microwave. "How was your day?" I asked, watching the plate rotate behind the glass. "Fine. The Johnson account is being difficult about the new campaign direction." Rachel leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Who were you meeting with today?" "Mostly angel investors, a couple of smaller VC firms." The microwave beeped, and I retrieved my lukewarm dinner. One of them seemed particularly interested. Eli thinks? Eli says? Eli believes." Rachel cut in, her voice razor sharp. "Do you ever have an original thought that doesn't come from your partner?" I set my plate down, startled by her venom. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of hearing about Eli's opinions while you throw away everything we've built together on this pipe dream." The exhaustion of the day combined with her unexpected attacks sparked something in me. This pipe dream could secure our future if you just have a little faith. "Faith?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "I've given you 18 months of faith, Daniel. 18 months of watching our savings disappear. 18 months of essentially living alone while you work yourself to death. For what? Some fantasy of being the next tech billionaire?" I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. "That's not fair. I'm trying to build something meaningful." "And what about us? What about this marriage? Is that not meaningful enough to build?" Her words hit a nerve. "I'm doing this for us." "No." Rachel slammed her hand on the counter, making me flinch. "You're doing this for yourself, for your ego. If it were for us, you'd care that I'm miserable, that I feel like a widow whose husband is still breathing." We stared at each other across the kitchen, the distance between us suddenly vast. I could see tears forming in her eyes, But there was something else there too, a coldness I'd never seen before. "You know what the worst part is?" she continued, her voice trembling. "I don't even need you anymore. I pay most of the bills now anyway. I manage this household alone. I've learned to live without your presence, your support, your partnership." Each word was like a dagger. I stood silent, unable to form a defense. "You never do enough," she shouted, her voice rising to fill our apartment. "Not for this marriage. Not for me. You're always promising someday, but someday never comes." In that moment, something inside me broke. Not with a bang, but with a quiet acceptance, the kind that comes when you finally acknowledge a truth you've been avoiding. Rachel and I were broken, and perhaps had been for longer than I wanted to admit. I looked at this woman I had loved for 7 years, now a stranger filled with resentment, and felt nothing but exhaustion. Without a word, I walked past her to our bedroom. I pulled out the duffel bag from under the bed and began methodically packing clothes, toiletries, my laptop charger. Rachel followed, standing in the doorway with arms crossed. "What are you doing?" she demanded, but her voice had lost its fire. "What you've wanted me to do for months," I replied quietly, zipping the bag closed. "I'm removing the burden of my presence from your life." "So you're just going to leave? Run away from our problems?" I shouldered the bag and turned to face her. "No, Rachel, I'm acknowledging them. You don't need me anymore. You don't want me, so I'm giving you what you want." I walked past her, pausing only to grab my keys and wallet from the entry table. At the door, I looked back one last time. Rachel stood frozen in the hallway, her expression unreadable. "I'll stop the automatic rent payments from our joint account," I said, "since you don't need my contribution anymore." The door closed softly behind me as I stepped into the night, uncertain of everything except that I couldn't stay another minute in a home where I was neither wanted nor respected. "You can stay as long as you need, man." Mark's offer came with a gentle squeeze of my shoulder, as he showed me to his spare room. It wasn't much, just enough space for a twin bed and a small desk, but it felt like sanctuary after the emotional battlefield. "I appreciate it," I said, setting my duffel bag on the floor. "It won't be for long." Mark nodded, though I caught the skepticism in his eyes. We'd been friends since college, and he had witnessed the slow deterioration of my marriage through occasional dinners and concerned text messages. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll figure everything out tomorrow." But sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, my phone deliberately turned off to avoid the barrage of texts or calls I expected from Rachel. Part of me wanted her to reach out, to apologize, to say she hadn't meant those cutting words. Another part, a part I was only beginning to acknowledge, felt relieved by the silence. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of lightness. For the first time in months, there was no weight of disappointment hanging over me, no silent judgment tracking my movements. I showered, dressed in fresh clothes, and headed to the kitchen where Mark had already made coffee. "What's the plan?" he asked, sliding a mug across the counter. I took a deep breath. "I'm going all in on Technova." Mark raised an eyebrow. "All in? No distractions, no compromises. No more trying to balance a home life that doesn't exist anymore," I explained. "Just pure focus on making this work." By noon, I was at our office, surprising Eli, who had expected me to take the day off after our marathon of meetings. "Danny? What are you doing here?" He looked up from his computer, concern etched across his face. "Is everything okay?" "I left Rachel," I said, the words feeling strangely liberating as they left my mouth. "Or she kicked me out. I'm not sure which." Eli's eyes widened. "Shit, man. I'm sorry." I shrugged, unpacking my laptop. "Don't be. It's been coming for a while, and now I can dedicate everything to Technova, without the guilt." For the next 3 weeks, I lived and breathed our startup. I slept on the office couch, more nights than at Mark's place, showered at the gym down the street, and survived on takeout and vending machine snacks. But the code I wrote during those weeks was some of my best work. Without the emotional drain of my failing marriage, my mind was clear, focused, efficient. Eli noticed the change. "You're like a machine lately," he commented one evening, as we reviewed our latest prototype. "But I'm a little worried about you." I glanced up from my screen. "Don't be, I'm good. Better than I've been in a long time." And it was true. The silence in my life, no arguments, no passive-aggressive comments, no disappointed sighs, was nurturing me in a way I hadn't expected. I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of Rachel's expectations. On day 5 of my self-imposed exile, I finally turned on my phone. It lit up with notifications, 12 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from Rachel. I scrolled through them without reading, then deleted the entire conversation thread. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it. Instead, I opened social media, something I rarely checked. Rachel's profile was the first thing I saw, a photo of her at a bar with friends, captioned, "Sometimes you have to let go of what's weighing you down to remember who you are." The timestamp showed it was posted just 2 days after I left. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. More posts followed. Rachel at a concert, Rachel trying a new restaurant, Rachel embracing change with a dramatic haircut, each post more carefree than the last, as if our separation had liberated her as much as it had me. But then the tone shifted. A week after I left came a vague post. "Not everything is as it appears. Missing what was taken for granted." Then another. "Sometimes silence hurts more than words ever could." And most recently, reaching out into the void, hoping for an echo. I closed the app and set my phone down. A complicated knot of emotions tangling in my chest. Part of me felt vindicated by her apparent regret, but another part recognized the manipulation. She was performing for our mutual friends, for her family, for me if I happened to be watching. When my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Rachel later that night, I let it ring through to voicemail. And the next call, and the one after that, I noticed my phone lighting up repeatedly during our meeting with a potential developer we wanted to bring onto the team. "You sure you don't need to get that?" he asked, during a break. I shook my head. "It's not important." "Is it Rachel?" "Yeah." I pocketed the phone. "But I'm not ready to talk to her." "What are you going to do about—" Eli gestured vaguely, searching for words. "The marriage?" I supplied. "I don't know yet. Right now I'm focused on us, on Technova. Everything else can wait." As the days passed, Rachel's calls became less frequent, but her social media presence grew more pointed. Thinly veiled posts about selfishness, about abandonment, about men who couldn't handle strong women. I watched from a distance, recognizing the narrative she was crafting, one where she was the victim, and I the villain, who had walked out without explanation. In a way she was right. I hadn't explained. I hadn't fought. I had simply left. But what explanation could there be for years of subtle undermining, of dismissal, of making me feel that my dreams were worthless? The silence between us spoke volumes. It told me that she hadn't really understood what drove me away. It told me that she was more concerned with how things appeared than with what had actually broken between us. Most importantly, it told me that the peaceful focus I'd found in her absence was something I wasn't ready to give up. So when the next call came, I let it ring into silence once more. I wasn't ignoring her out of spite. I was protecting the clarity I'd found, the renewed sense of purpose that was finally bearing fruit. 3 weeks after walking out of my apartment and my marriage, I sat in the conference room of Meridian Ventures, my heart hammering against my ribs. Eli was beside me, leg bouncing nervously under the table as we waited for the partners to return. We had just finished our pitch, the culmination of 18 months of work, sacrifice and vision, and now our future hung in the deliberation happening behind closed doors down the hall. "Stop fidgeting," I murmured to Eli. "You're making me more nervous." He shot me an apologetic grin. "Sorry, can't help it. This feels different, doesn't it?" I nodded. Our presentation had flowed perfectly. The demo had worked without a single glitch. The questions from the partners had been pointed but not dismissive, probing for weaknesses but seemingly satisfied with our answers. For the first time we hadn't felt like beggars at the gate but valued innovators with something genuine to offer. The door opened, and 3 partners filed back in. Their faces revealed nothing as they took their seats across from us. Miranda Chen, the lead partner, folded her hands on the table and looked at us steadily. "We've seen dozens of CRM solutions come through these doors," she began, her voice even. "Most are incremental improvements at best, uninspired copies at worst." My stomach dropped. This was how rejection usually started. an acknowledgement of the crowded market before the inevitable not for us. But then Miranda smiled. Yours is neither. We believe Technova addresses pain points for small businesses that established players have ignored for years. The automation features are elegant, the interface is intuitive. Most importantly, the early user feedback you've gathered is compelling. Eli and I exchanged a quick glance, hardly daring to hope. Meridian Ventures would like to offer you a term sheet, Miranda continued, sliding a folder across the table. $3 million in Series A funding, with additional resources for recruitment and market expansion. The words hung in the air like a mirage. I reached for the folder with a hand that wasn't entirely steady. $3 million, Eli repeated, sounding dazed. We believe in what you're building, said James Harper, another partner. And we believe in the team you've assembled. This funding should accelerate your growth significantly. We spent the next hour discussing terms, expectations, and next steps. By the time we left the building, stepping into the late afternoon sunlight, the reality was beginning to sink in. We did it, Eli said, grabbing my shoulders. We did it, Danny. A laugh escaped me, part disbelief, part overwhelming relief. $3 million. Not just the money, Eli said as we walked toward the subway, practically floating. It's Meridian, their network, their expertise, their validation of everything we've been saying all along. He was right. Meridian's backing meant more than capital. It meant doors opening, credibility established, a future secured. It meant I hadn't been chasing a fantasy after all. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. We signed the paperwork, received the first tranche of funding, and immediately began executing our expansion plan. We leased proper office space in a glass and steel building downtown, nothing extravagant, but a far cry from our previous cramped quarters. We hired 3 developers, a UI/UX specialist, and a marketing coordinator. Business cards arrived with my name followed by co-founder and CTO. 1 month after the funding announcement, I stood in our new office, watching our team work. 10 people now, all focused on bringing our vision to life. My vision. The one Rachel had dismissed as a pipe dream. I thought about her occasionally, in quiet moments between meetings, or late at night when I finally returned to the apartment I'd leased near the office. I had moved my remaining belongings out of our shared apartment, while she was at work, leaving my key on the counter. We still hadn't spoken directly, though I'd received an email from her asking to talk about our situation 2 weeks ago. I hadn't replied. It wasn't spite that kept me silent. It was self-preservation. I was finally thriving, finally proving my worth, not just to the world, but to myself. I wasn't ready to let Rachel's voice back into my head, undermining that newfound confidence. Hey, CTO, Eli called from across the room, breaking my reverie. The team wants to know if you'll join us for happy hour to celebrate shipping the new feature set. I smiled, watching our developers high-fiving over successfully deploying code that would serve thousands of businesses. Absolutely. Later that evening, as we claimed a table at a nearby bar, someone raised a toast to Technova's success. Glasses clinked, and for the first time in years I felt completely present in the moment. Not anxious about the future or defensive about my choices. After 2 drinks, I stepped outside to get some air and check my email. Among the usual business correspondence was a notification from our finance team. My shares in the company had been formally registered. Their current valuation, post-funding, was listed in black and white. I stared at the number, doing the mental math. My ownership stake was now worth more than the combined value of everything Rachel and I had owned together. The apartment, the cars, the investments, everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those months of her resentment, her disbelief, her accusations that I was wasting our life together. And now, had she remained supportive, had she shared my vision for just a little longer, she would have shared in this success. I put my phone away and looked up at the night sky, barely visible through the city lights. This was the life I had been building all along. This was what I had been trying to explain to Rachel on all those nights she rolled her eyes at my enthusiasm. And she had walked out of it long before I walked out of our apartment. As I rejoined the team inside, welcomed by their easy camaraderie and genuine respect, I knew I had made the right choice. Not just for my career, but for my spirit. Here, surrounded by people who believed in me, who valued my contribution, I was becoming the person I was meant to be. Rachel had never needed me, as she'd so vehemently declared. But as it turned out, I hadn't needed her either. At least, not the version of her who couldn't see beyond her own immediate comfort to the greater potential of what we might have built together. 6 weeks had passed since I walked out of my marriage. Technova had transformed from a struggling startup into a legitimate business with growing customer accounts and industry recognition. A tech blog had featured us in their Startups to Watch column, and our user base was expanding by double digits each week. I had settled into a new rhythm, one defined by progress rather than frustration, by growth rather than stagnation. My phone buzzed as I was reviewing code late one evening. The office had emptied hours ago, but I remained, finding comfort in the quiet productivity of night work. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Eli or perhaps one of our developers with a question about the deployment scheduled for tomorrow. Instead, I saw Rachel's name. My finger hovered over the notification. We hadn't spoken since that night. I walked out. I had changed my automatic payments, removed my name from our shared utilities, and arranged for the last of my belongings to be collected through Mark to avoid any contact. For all intents and purposes, Rachel had become a ghost from my past life, present in memory, but absent from my daily reality. I tapped the message. Daniel, I didn't mean what I said that night. I was stressed. Can we talk? The simplicity of it struck me. No lengthy explanation, no detailed apology. Just a brief dismissal of the words that had shattered whatever remained of our relationship, as if I was stressed could erase the months of belittlement. The constant questioning of my choices, the fundamental lack of faith in me and my vision. Before I could decide whether to respond, another message appeared. The landlord delivered an eviction notice today. The rent is 3 weeks overdue. I didn't realize you'd stopped the automatic payments until I got the first late notice, and by then my account was already overdrawn from some unexpected expenses. I set the phone down on my desk, leaning back in my chair. So there it was, the real reason behind her sudden desire to reconnect. Not remorse for her words, not recognition of how she had treated me, but financial necessity. Rachel needed my money, not me. I picked up the phone again, as a third message arrived. I know things ended badly between us, but I never thought you'd leave me in this position. This isn't like you, Daniel. Please call me so we can figure something out. A hollow laugh escaped me. This wasn't like me. The Daniel she knew would have absorbed the hurt, made excuses for her behavior, and continued silently paying the bills while receiving nothing but contempt in return. That version of me had died the night she declared she didn't need me. I set the phone down again without responding, and turned back to my computer. The code on the screen blurred as memories surfaced. Rachel and I touring that apartment 3 years ago, excited about the hardwood floors and the view of the park from the living room window. Rachel insisting we take it despite the steep rent, assuring me it was worth stretching our budget for. Rachel decorating each room with meticulous care, creating the perfect backdrop for the life she envisioned. A life that apparently didn't require my active participation, just my financial contribution. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it, but the persistent vibration against the desk demanded attention. When I finally looked, I saw it wasn't another text but an incoming call from Rachel. My heart quickened despite myself. After weeks of silence, the thought of hearing her voice stirred complicated emotions I'd been carefully suppressing. I let it ring until voicemail picked up, then watched as a notification appeared, indicating she had left a message. Against my better judgment, I played it. Daniel. Her voice was strained, a mixture of frustration and barely controlled panic. I don't understand why you're doing this. I know we had a fight, but this is our home. You can't just... A deep breath. The landlord says I have 3 days to pay in full or the eviction proceeds. My credit will be ruined. Please call me back. Please. The message ended abruptly. I set the phone down and stared at the city lights visible through the office window, considering my options. I could pay the overdue rent. I had the money now. More than enough. I could bail Rachel out, maintain the peace, prevent the messiness of an eviction on either of our records. But then what? She would learn nothing. She would see me as the same pushover I had always been, ready to rescue her at the first hint of distress, regardless of how she had treated me. And more importantly, I would be undermining my own growth, my own hard-won self-respect. Another message arrived. I've been trying to find a second job to cover the gap, but nothing pays enough on such short notice. My parents can't help right now. I don't know what to do, Daniel. I could picture her sitting in her apartment, surrounded by the life she had curated, now facing the consequences of her own declarations of independence. The thought brought me no joy, but neither did it compel me to action. Once I would have dropped everything to fix this problem for her. I would have transferred the money immediately, accepted whatever half-hearted gratitude she offered, and returned to being the silent provider she had taken for granted. But that man was gone. I stared at her messages for a long moment, then set my phone face down on the desk and returned to my work. The code demanded my attention, as did the team that would arrive in the morning, looking to me for guidance and leadership. This was my life now, a life built on my terms, valued on my contributions, measured by my standards. Rachel's crisis was no longer mine to solve. As midnight approached, I finally shut down my computer and gathered my things to head home. My phone showed 3 more missed calls from Rachel and several additional texts, each more desperate than the last. I scrolled through them without truly reading, then placed the phone in my pocket. The message had indeed come too late. Not because I couldn't forgive her words that night, but because those words had finally revealed the truth of our relationship, a truth I had needed to see to find my own path forward. And on that path, there was no room for looking back. 3 months after Rachel's desperate messages, I stood at the window of my new office on the 27th floor of a downtown high-rise. The city sprawled below me, a tapestry of possibilities I once couldn't have imagined for myself. Technova had expanded again, 32 employees now, with more joining each month. Our latest feature rollout had been covered by 3 major tech publications, and our user base had crossed the 10,000 mark. I never replied to Rachel's texts or calls that night, or the ones that followed for weeks after. Eventually they stopped. I learned through a mutual friend that she had been forced to move out of the apartment, and was staying with her sister until she found a place she could afford on her own. I felt a momentary pang of guilt, quickly replaced by the understanding that this was the natural consequence of her choices and mine. "Danny, the team's waiting in the conference room," Eli said, appearing at my office door. "Quarterly review starts in 5. I nodded, collecting my tablet and following him down the hallway. Our team sat around the large table, laptops open, an energy of anticipation filling the room. These were brilliant people who had chosen to join our vision, who valued what we were building. Every day I walked into this office feeling a respect I had never experienced in my marriage. Before we dive into the numbers, I began after taking my seat at the head of the table. I want to acknowledge what we've accomplished together. 6 months ago, Technova was 2 guys working out of what was essentially a closet. Laughter rippled around the table. Today, we're changing how thousands of small businesses manage their customer relationships. That's not just metrics and code, that's real impact on real people. The presentation that followed was a testament to persistence. Revenue growth exceeding projections. Customer retention at 92%. 3 new enterprise clients signed just last week. As our CFO wrapped up the financial overview, I caught Eli's eye across the table. His slight nod conveyed what we were both thinking. We had been right to believe, right to persevere, right to ignore everyone who had doubted us. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find a small package on my desk. The return address showed it was from my parents. Probably a belated birthday gift, as my 43rd birthday had passed 2 weeks ago with little fanfare. While I was on a business trip, I opened it to find a framed photograph of me as a child, standing proudly next to a science fair project. A note from my mother was attached. "Found this while cleaning out the attic. You always were determined to build things, even when no one else understood what you were creating. So proud of the man you've become." I set the frame on my desk, oddly moved by this glimpse of my childhood self. That boy had dreamed of creating something meaningful, something that would outlast him. Despite all the detours and disappointments, I had somehow found my way back to that pure ambition. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification: dinner with Lena at 7. We had been dating for 6 weeks, nothing serious yet, but refreshingly honest. Lena was a UX designer who worked for one of our partner companies. She understood the demands of startup life and had her own ambitious career goals. Our relationship existed in a space of mutual respect and genuine interest, without the weight of expectations that had suffocated my marriage. As I was preparing to leave for the day, my office phone rang. Our receptionist's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Chen, there's a Rachel Wilson asking to see you. She doesn't have an appointment but says it's important. Should I send her up?" My body tensed at the name. Rachel. Here. After months of silence. "No," I said after a moment's consideration. "Tell her I'm unavailable." "She's quite insistent," the receptionist replied, her voice lowered. "Says she'll wait as long as necessary." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I'll come down." The elevator ride to the lobby felt interminable. I didn't know what Rachel wanted, but I knew what I didn't want: to be pulled back into the dynamics that had diminished me for so long. She was sitting in one of the modern armchairs in the reception area, looking smaller than I remembered. When she saw me, she stood quickly, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "Thank you for seeing me." "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, conscious of the receptionist's curious glance. "Could we talk somewhere private?" I shook my head. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." Rachel's eyes darted around the expansive lobby. "I heard about your success, the funding, the growth. I'm happy for you. Is that why you came? To tell me you're happy for me?" "No." She took a deep breath. "I came to apologize. Properly. What I said that night about not needing you, about you never doing enough, it was cruel and untrue." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I had come to expect. But all I saw was exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "But it doesn't change anything." "It could," she said quickly. "We could try again. Now that your company has taken off, now that the pressure is off." And there it was. The real reason. Now that I'm successful, I finished for her. Now that the risk has paid off, now that I've proven my worth through financial validation. Rachel flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I kept my voice steady. "You didn't want a partner, Rachel. You wanted a provider. And you weren't willing to weather the uncertainty to get there." "That's not true," she protested. But her eyes betrayed her. "It is," I said with certainty that came from months of reflection. "And you know what? I'm grateful. If you hadn't shown me so clearly where I stood with you, I might never have found the courage to fully commit to building this life, this company." I glanced at my watch. "I have to go. I have dinner plans." Rachel's expression tightened at the implication. "With someone special? With someone who sees me," I replied simply. "Goodbye, Rachel." As I walked out into the early evening light, I felt no triumph, no vindication. Just a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The life I had built without Rachel wasn't about proving her wrong, it was about finally proving myself right. I had created this success on my own terms, and I was going to live life that way too, undefined by someone else's limitations, unburdened by conditional love, unapologetic about my ambitions. This was the life I chose. This was the man I had become, and I wouldn't have it any other way.